Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining tonight's event. My name is Rashard Snellings. I am a member of the South Fulton Coalition. Tonight, we'll be featuring candidates for the Georgia Superintendent of Schools race. We have an election coming up, and we in the community would like to hear what our candidates running for this important position have to say. Just to let you know a little bit about the South Fulton Coalition, our mission is to implement action programs for the continued improvement, accountability, and integrity of the city of South Fulton and Fulton County government elected officials. Our vision is to strategically enforce strong local government and financial accountability so constituents are consulted and actively involved in our local government spending and taxation decisions. So again, I would like to thank everyone for joining our town hall today. So far on the line, we have Ron Booth. He will be our co-moderator. I will be your main moderator. We also have candidate James Morrow, John Barge, and we are waiting on Miss Cersei to join. That's what we have going on tonight. And without further ado, I would just like to let you know some of our ground rules. We are going to allow the candidates 3 minutes for opening remarks. After those opening remarks, we will turn it over to the residents and the voters to ask questions of our candidates. In the event that the residents aren't asking questions, the coalition has a few questions that we can ask until the residents feel comfortable asking questions. I see Alicia Cersei is on the line now. Thank you, Ms. Cersei, for joining. I appreciate it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, awesome. All right, so what I was just explaining was that we're going to allow the candidates 3 minutes for opening remarks. After that, we're going to turn it over to the residents for the residents to ask questions. As I was explaining before you joined the call, that the residents tend to join the call a little bit later. So I see it's lighting up now. So we should have more people joining. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John Barge and give you the floor. You have 3 minutes for your opening remarks. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Rashard and the South Fulton Coalition, for the opportunity to speak and to share our platforms for running for state school superintendent. I don't think there has really ever been a more critical time in our state's history to really think about where we are as a state and where we're going when it comes to education. I'm a lifelong educator. For those that do not know who I am, I retired 2 years ago after a 30-year career in public education. I started as a high school English teacher and became an assistant principal and principal. I was a curriculum director for a local school district. I've been a local school superintendent, and I've actually held the office of state superintendent previously. I have a master's and specialist degree in educational leadership from the University of West Georgia and a doctorate degree in educational leadership from the University of Georgia. Yeah, I think, when you look at the state superintendency and the roles and responsibilities of that office, the main responsibility that the superintendent has is one of policy and working with your local school board to frame policy that local school districts operate within in the state of Georgia. So I think it's very critical that we have experienced, successful leadership at the helm to make sure that we have the policies in place to lead our school districts. So I'm not necessarily keeping my time, so I don't have a timekeeper, but without really getting into a whole lot of other stuff, I'll just say I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope to answer any questions that you guys have, and I hope to earn your support for state school superintendent. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. Now, you still do have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Oh, 1 minute and 30 seconds. Okay. So platform-wise, I think there are 3 key issues for me. And that's restoring the foundation. I think we are so far away from what our core mission is as educators in the state. That is to teach reading, writing, and math, to teach kids how to think and not what to think. And we have gone so far into this area of social and cultural issues. We're missing the mark. And it's showing up in our student data and our test scores. Our fourth grade reading and math scores are the lowest they've been in 15 years. Our eighth grade reading and math scores are the lowest they've been in 8 years. Our national ranking as a quality education state has fallen 21 slots in 7 years. There's a huge slide that's going on that we need to address. So getting back to our basics, getting back to our core mission, rebuilding parent trust in education, making sure that parents are empowered to be in control of their child's education, and then rebuilding the Department of Education and making it into an agency that is actually functions as a service agency to school districts across the state of Georgia. So that's the platform in a nutshell. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now, I see that we have Curry Hitchens that just joined. Mr. Hitchens, what we're doing right now is we're going through opening remarks, and you have 3 minutes for opening remarks. So now I'm going to turn it over to James Morrow. You can have the floor for your opening remarks. You have 3 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is James Morrow, and I'm a candidate for state superintendent. I have 25 years of classroom teacher experience. I received my bachelor's degree in history with a minor in physical education from the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff in 1997. I also played basketball and ran track at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. When I graduated, I became the assistant men's basketball coach at Philander Smith College, which is a small HBCU located downtown Little Rock, Arkansas. While I was coaching at Philander Smith, I attended the University of Arkansas Little Rock, where I received my master's degree in secondary education with an emphasis in social sciences. I've taught in Little Rock School District, Clark County School District in Las Vegas, and I've been a teacher in the Atlanta metro area for the past 16 years. And I can sit up here, and all of us can sit up here and tell you we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that. But the biggest issue in schools today is discipline and disrespect to teachers. Teachers are tired of being physically, mentally, emotionally, and verbally abused by students, by parents, and administrators. Some of the subjects that I've taught: AP United States History, AP Human Geography, American Government, World History, United States and World Affairs, and currently I teach physical education. We must find a way to make teaching more appealing to the students that are in college. Right now, becoming a teacher is not really appealing. There's a shortage of up to 90,000 teachers in the United States, and no one is kicking down doors to become a teacher. So again, I can sit up here and tell you that I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that, but the biggest issue, how are we gonna accomplish anything if we don't have teachers in place? Currently in Fulton County, there's a shortage of 600 teachers, 150 special ed teachers. So the only way we're gonna be able to educate kids and help them learn and achieve the way they're supposed to is by having teachers. We gotta find a way to sometimes put teachers first. Also, mental health. A lot of times the students, they don't receive enough to eat. They have to babysit their little brothers and sisters, and they're just not in a happy environment. And when they're not in a happy environment, students can't achieve. A lot of times, the only time they get to eat is when they come to school and receive breakfast and lunch, and they might go to bed hungry, and they might eat a bowl of cereal. So we gotta find a way where we can help parents when they fall to get back on their feet. We also gotta incorporate a way to help the rural schools, the small schools that people tend to forget about. A lot of times those kids have disadvantages because they don't have the same opportunities that the kids in the Atlanta metro area have, or maybe larger cities. So those are some of the things that I would fight for. Basically, I'm an advocate for teachers. When I saw that there was a dentist, a pediatric dentist running for this position, I felt like Mr. Morrow had to step up and do the right thing and be an advocate for teachers. You know, I would never
15 seconds remaining.
I would never decide overnight that I would want to do something else. I've always been a teacher for the past 25 years. Ever since I was 22, I'm 47 now. So this is the only profession I know. I would like to thank you all for inviting me. Vote Morrow for a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, Miss Cersei, I'm going to turn it over to you. You have 3 minutes to make your opening remarks. You have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rashard. Thank you, South Fulton Democrats. And thank you to all of the voters who are here this evening to come and hear what we have to say. Dr. Barge, it's good to see you. We
It's
worked
good to see
together when
you.
I was in the legislature. And hello to my fellow candidates. We've spent the day together. Now we'll spend the evening together. I'm Alicia Thomas Searcy, your candidate for state school superintendent. A little bit about me. I grew up in Florida, came here to Atlanta to attend the Spelman College. I'm a graduate of Spelman and also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I am the first African-American elected to the Georgia House of Representatives from Cobb County and was elected at the age of 23. After being elected 5 more times, I retired from the legislature in 2014 and decided to run for state school superintendent. And I did not win. During that time, though, I went back to school and earned a master's degree in education leadership. I also went through 2 very prestigious superintendent's training programs, and then had the tremendous opportunity of leading a set of schools in the metro Atlanta area. And I remember sitting in my office during that time and saying, thank you, God, for closed doors, because it wasn't until I started leading schools until I realized that I was not ready to be state school superintendent. I think having my policy background was critical and is critical for this job, but leading schools is equally critical, because unless you have worked to get federal and state programs like Title I, school nutrition, special education programs into compliance, unless you've hired principals, unless you have had the pressures of having to make the scores in order to keep your schools open, you don't understand what it's like to be an educator and work within this public school system. And I think the state school superintendent must have those experiences. I also think the state school superintendent needs to have experience in policymaking. When I was in the legislature, I passed education laws and worked with the Department of Education and the superintendent at that time to promulgate the rules so that districts would follow the intent of the law that I passed. It's a very specific skill set and specific set of experiences that are absolutely critical to be successful in this job. When I got to Ivy Prep, one of our elementary school had a 43 CCRPI score. That's the state index that all of our public schools are judged by. When my team and I got there and got in to do the work that was necessary, we raised that score from a 43 to an 85.
You have 15 seconds remaining.
Our teacher retention rate was 25, we raised it to 75. And so I'm running because I want to be a champion for teachers. I want to empower parents, and I want to work with every single one of you to reimagine public education. And so thank you for this opportunity to be here with you. I'm looking forward to these questions, and I ask for your vote early or on May 24th. We have to change our public education system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, I would like to turn it over to Curry Hitchens. Mr. Hitchens, you have the floor. You have 3 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you. Hi, it's Curry Hitchens. I am running for state superintendent of schools as well. I grew up in Georgia, in Whitfield County, Georgia, and went to kindergarten through 12th grade schools there, public schools in Whitfield County, Georgia. I then went to Agnes Scott College and got a master's degree from the University of Georgia in children's literature and education, and was a teacher for a while in City Schools of Decatur, and then went to law school because I wanted to do more for families. And actually in between there also did a year of AmeriCorps volunteer in a residential facility, a residential treatment facility for students. So kindergarten, elementary school students, middle school, high school students are all in this residential treatment facility. So I did a lot of different kinds of education. And then when I was an attorney, after graduating from Emory Law School, I practiced at Georgia Legal Services and Atlanta Legal Aid for my entire career as a legal services attorney. I did a lot of kinds of work, of course, to help families get out of poverty, to try to end poverty in the state of Georgia. But one of the main things that I did that I like the most, I think really is the most effective to fight poverty, was education work, because I think education is the way that we can get people out of poverty, the way to fight poverty, the way to fight racism, the way to fight ableism and any other ills in our society really is through education. So that's one reason I'm running. I'll hear more about the other reasons in a minute. But I did that work, but also did education work. So I did work to end the school to prison pipeline, as an attorney representing kids in school discipline cases, and also work to get kids services, accommodations they needed for disabilities in the schools. In fact, exactly what I did was fight for them to get what they needed, what they deserved, to be able to access the curriculum of other students. Those are some things I do. I actually still do those things. I still represent students in cases to obtain those services and to help get them out of the school to prison pipeline. And I work with other advocates doing that work across the state. And it was in the course of that work that I realized the laws that were coming down the pipeline, because as an attorney, you have to analyze the law every day. Basically, it's an integral part of your job. And one thing that I did was saw and look out for laws that are coming down the pipeline in Georgia. And I saw what was happening in the legislature to change really the face of Georgia. And in my opinion, one thing that's been happening in the Georgia legislature is we've been letting schools get worse and worse, which is not acceptable. And we've been letting them continue to be inequitable instead of making sure they're funded equitably and all schools are great. So the laws that came down the pipeline only have made schools, or will make schools worse, which is we're not letting teachers teach about racism and structural racism in classrooms anymore. And that's not acceptable. We need to make sure that students get a full and accurate education, that teachers are allowed to teach the truth. And I want to make sure that we fight against laws that are making it so that they can't do so. We need to be able to do that for many reasons, like I said, to try to solve a lot of our society's ills, but also so that we have students who are well-rounded and know about the world around them and won't be fooled by people telling them lies about what the world really is, telling them that they should be mad at other races or telling them that they should hurt people. That is not the kind of person we want to raise in Georgia. We want to make sure that people in Georgia are critical thinkers who can use their critical thinking skills to apply them to news and to what's going on in the world around them, to be able to know that these are not wise decisions, that people who commit violent acts and say these things are not okay. We need to make sure that Georgia's citizens know better and that Georgia's citizens are accepting of all people. And that is part of what we can do with education in Georgia. And I think that's one reason why people who are not accepting of others are fighting really
15
hard
seconds remaining.
to close schools in Georgia. So I'm Curry Hitchens. I put my information in the chat. I would love for you to check me out, South Fulton, and volunteer to help me in my campaign. Make a donation if you can. That would be great. I'm Curry Hitchens again, and I really want to fight for students, but also for teachers. And I think when we work together, we can make the whole state of Georgia great. We can make all Georgia public schools great schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And your first name is pronounced Curry, correct? You're on mute. I think you're on mute.
It wouldn't let me unmute, sorry. Now I can,
All right.
yes, it's Curry Hitchens, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so now at this time, I would like to turn it over to the voters that may have questions for the candidates. Please use the reactions option, raise your hand, and we will acknowledge you if we see your hand raised. So this is your opportunity to ask any questions you have about education to our superintendent of schools candidate. Now, Ron, do you have any questions in the chat that I'm not seeing in the chat?
I don't see any questions in the chat so far, but we'll give it another minute and I'll ask one.
All right, so while we wait for additional questions to come through, actually, I see Melissa has a question. Melissa, please unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Bear with me for a second. Am I unmuted?
You are. We hear you.
Okay. All right. So I do have a question. If you all have jobs, how will you handle those jobs if you were to win state superintendent?
Now, is that question for all the candidates?
That's for every single one of the candidates, because I'm confused as to how much you have to put into the job of a superintendent if you already have a job, or will that become your job or your career? I just need clarity on that.
All right, thank you so much. Ms. Thirsty, would you like to take that question first?
Absolutely. Great question. I think people need to understand this is a constitutional job, it's a constitutional position. And so it's an executive level that requires more than a 9 to 5. And frankly, if you think about all the work that needs to be done to improve our educational system, it's probably a 23-hour-a-day job. And so as an education consultant, that's what I do for a living currently. I'm in a great position to be able to transition from that business into being the state school superintendent full time. That's what I will focus on 100% of the time. Of course, alongside my husband and family and personal obligations. But I believe that the students of Georgia and parents and families, and frankly, the well-being of Georgia absolutely requires this person to do this and only this. And that is my commitment to the students of Georgia.
Thank you so much. Mr. Barge, would you like to take that question?
Sure. Yeah, that's a very good question. A lot of folks don't know that, but having been state superintendent before, I can tell you it is a full-time job. It is more than a full-time job. I remember going into the office after I was inaugurated and taking care of all of my paperwork. And so I was doing that with the HR folks, with a lot of other new employees to the department. And she was going over leave time, like sick leave. And they asked some questions, and I asked her a question about, I'm still participating in TRS, but do I still acquire sick leave? And she's like, no. I'm like, so what do I do if I'm sick? And she said, well, you don't come in. She said, you don't have to be here at all. You're an elected official. And I was quite shocked by that. And I did learn that previous superintendents prior to my time there may have only come in the office once a week, maybe once a month at school board meeting time. But I take that job very seriously. I mean, I'm doing this because I now have grandchildren that are starting school, and I'm very concerned as a grandparent about the quality of education currently and what's going on. And I retired 2 years ago after a 30-year career in public education. So I have no issue with this being a full-time job. I treated it as a full-time job before. I worked every day, Monday through Friday, drove from Rome to downtown Atlanta every single day. Does not bother me a bit. It's my duty and responsibility.
Thank you so much. Ms. Hitchens, would you like to take that question next?
Sure, I think everyone's got it right, though. It is definitely a full-time job. I actually had to quit my job even to run because I worked at Atlanta Legal Aid, and you're not allowed to run for a political office and work at Atlanta Legal Aid because of the federal funding they receive. So I'm ready, actually, to go ahead. The only cases I have are pro bono cases right now that will resolve before January of next year. So I'm definitely ready to start. It's a full-time job, like everyone has said, and I think that it's going to take a lot more than just 5 days a week to really work on schools across Georgia. I think we probably can all agree on that.
Thank you so much. Mr. Morrow.
Yes, I agree with the other candidates. It's a 24-hour job. You're always on call. You always have to meet with state representatives and state senators to try to get things done. So it's a full-time job. But I think the question was, would we be able to keep our job and still do this? No. And basically, I told my principal if I was to win, that I would have to take a leave of absence for 4 years from my teaching position in Clayton County. And I'm also the head girls flag football coach and head boys soccer coach. So I've already made arrangements with my administrators when I win to be able to take a leave of absence. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to turn it over to Ron Booth. You have the floor.
Thank you, Rashard. Hello, candidates. My question is, if you're elected as superintendent of Georgia schools, what are the specific policy changes, if any, that you would address and focus on in your first 100 days?
Ms. Cersei, would you like to take it first?
Sure, you like calling on me first, but no problem. No problem at all. This is not necessarily a policy, but I will tell you my first priority is to do a listening tour, to talk to educators, school leaders, superintendents, and specifically hone in on teachers. I am deeply concerned about the morale of teachers across our state. I don't think that they've had a platform for a long time, if ever, to really speak about the things that matter to them and have an elected official in particular who can not only listen, but take action. And in my legislative work, as well as when I was superintendent, our success was built on listening. I think the people who are on the front lines, who are closest to the challenges, are the ones who have the best solutions. And so I want to spend time listening and being an advocate and a champion for teachers and taking action on the things that they need, which we know there are certainly pay issues, but it's also being overwhelmed with unnecessary paperwork. It's not feeling respected and honored by, I think, society and our community. So we have some work to do in that respect. A couple of other things that I want to work on is I really want to address some of the challenges that we have in special education. If you are a parent who has a child with special needs, and I am, I know that there are many challenges in our public education system as it relates to teachers being properly trained and prepared to sit on IEP meetings, parents being properly prepared to know how to advocate for their children and the accommodations that they need. The other piece that I really want to focus on is reimagining public education. I often talk about my daughter and mother having a conversation about what school looked like when my mom was there. And if you were to look at a picture of school in the 1700s and look at school today, it very much looks the same. And I believe that we have to stop trying to deliver a telegram education to a TikTok generation. And so there's a lot of work that also needs to be done, again, listening to stakeholders from across the state, to talk about what education would look like without all the red tape. How do we redesign a system that is more relevant to our students? How do we create opportunities like pre-apprenticeship programs so that students can start learning and earning at the same time in their junior year and senior years of high school, so that when they graduate, if they're not choosing to go to college, they're entering gainful employment opportunities. The final thing that I will mention is that I really want to create an Office of Equity in the Department of Education. We know of many issues across the state where students just aren't getting what they deserve in terms of accommodations and facilities in their schools, in terms of access to high quality and effective teachers, in terms of access to broadband when you talk about our rural districts. So there are a number of things that we're falling behind in terms of equity and making sure that all of our students, regardless of their zip code, have access to the resources that they need to be successful. So I want to spend time making sure that we look at every single school, every single district to determine what are the needs and decide as state school superintendent and the Department of Education that we are going to focus on those schools and those districts that have been grossly underserved for way too long.
Thank you so much. Mr. Morrow, would you like to take that question?
Just had to unmute. In order for us to be successful, we got to have quality teachers. So first, I would try to find a way where we can have more pay for teachers in addition to trying to retain them. Nobody's kicking down any doors trying to become a teacher. So we got to find a way to make it more appealing. Second, teachers evaluations. It's called TEKS. A lot of times you have administrators that use this as an intimidating and a threatening tool. So I would try to find a way to correct that so administrators wouldn't do that. And I can give you an example. In 2006, I was the athletic director, head football, head basketball, head track coach at Sylvan Hills Middle School in Atlanta Public Schools. I told my principal at the time that I wasn't feeling middle school anymore. The kids are off the chain, especially sixth graders. I told her I was leaving and going to Thurl High School to coach football. She told me, she said, and she with a smile on her face, "You're not going anywhere, Mr. Morrow. You wear too many hats in my building. I can't allow you to leave." But I just thought she was just talking. My last formal evaluation of the year, the lady gave me 11 needs improvement. It's like she played tic-tac-toe on my evaluation. And I was teaching physical education at the time. So I feel like we got to find a way where administrators will grade teachers based on their performance as a classroom instructor instead of grading them based on how they feel about them personally. Because I've been teaching since 1997. And I can tell you, a lot of times administrators get upset when you're in a faculty meeting and you ask them a question and they have a hard time answering it. Now they want to start coming and evaluate you every day. And it's like basically with teachers, like if you're not in the clique, you get observed like 3 or 4 times a week. But if you're in the clique, you don't get observed at all. And the administrator just comes through and tells you, hey, just sign this. And you'll be like, when did you observe me? I'll just sign the paper. So, it's not any fairness in this. And also I would encourage more teachers to understand what equity and compliance is in human resources. Basically, as a teacher, if you have a complaint or you have an issue, you can file a complaint with the equity and compliance on the human resources, and they would do an investigation. But a lot of times teachers don't want to rock the boat because most of them live check to check, and it's hard for them to like stand up for themselves. So that's what I would try to do as far as policy, because we're not going to be able to do anything if we don't have any teachers. And also we got to incorporate more discipline where the students will have consequences for the things that they do. A lot of times students have 100 absences and 50 tardies, and they're still allowed to graduate. That's a problem. When I was in school, if you had more than 10 unexcused absences, you failed the class for the semester. So too much time is spent adjusting to the children instead of them making them adjust to what needs to be done. So that's what I would try to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Barge, would you like to unmute yourself and address that question?
Great, thank you so much. Again, by experience and being in this role previously, the first thing priority-wise with policy is we have to address the legislation that the Georgia legislature just passed this past session. That's part of the superintendent and the state board's responsibility is when legislation is passed to take that legislation and then draft school policy for local school districts to operate within where they are meeting the letter of the law. So priority is address the legislation that was just passed around the Parents' Bill of Rights, the not teaching of any divisive concepts, and the legislation around obscene materials, making sure we have processes in place for parents to question and to challenge obscene materials in our media centers. Once those things have been addressed, one of my very first priorities is to open an Office of Transparency and Accountability within the Department of Education. And my plan is to actually hire a parent for that role who can be a liaison between the Department of Education and the parents. So when parents are having concerns or issues, let's say with even things that Ms. Searcy has raised about special needs children and not having their needs met, their IEPs not being met, that if parents are not able to make any resolve or get any resolution with their local school board, they would actually come make a call to our Office of Transparency and Accountability, and we would put some wheels in motion to make sure parents' concerns are addressed by the local school board. Additionally, we all know that children have to be reading on grade level by 3rd grade, or they will struggle the rest of their school careers. And statistically, there is a greater chance that they will drop out of high school and wind up in prison than those students who are reading on grade level by 3rd grade. Knowing that we know that and having the extensive research that we have to support that idea, why are we doing anything in K-3 except focusing on literacy and numeracy to make sure every child is on grade level with basic reading and math by the end of 3rd grade? So I will make sure through policy that we are focusing on what needs to be focused, especially in K-3, to ensure that all children have what they need to be on grade level by the end of 3rd grade. And then finally, I want to make sure that we restore accountability at the Department of Education. We have been backing off of that for years. In fact, school districts have not received a CCRPI score for several years. We have backed off on the weighting of end of course exams. When you back off on accountability, what gets measured gets done. We know that. But then if you have a very low expectation, for example, high school end of course right now, the weighting has been changed to 0.01%. So when you have a final exam, and you guys that are teachers know this, when you have a final exam that counts as 0.01% of the final grade, how serious are children going to take that final exam? Not very seriously. So we've got to make sure that we have accountability in place. The teacher evaluation system, the teacher keys is a strong system compared to what we had in the old Georgia Teacher Observation Instrument, which is what Morrow was referencing in 2006, was the old G-Toy, because TEKS didn't come around until about 2014. So we've got to make sure that we're holding teachers accountable, we're holding school districts accountable, we're holding students accountable to achieving what we expect them to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Hitchens, would you like to address that question?
Of course, yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So first of all, of course, Mr. Bart is right. We definitely have to look at the policies that need to be enacted from the laws that just passed. I do think that maybe the Department of Education will try to go ahead and do that, but it probably won't be a finished process by January when we would take office, when I would take office. So that is something definitely to work on. And that's actually one reason that I ran. I want to make sure to protect teachers as much as possible from what could happen in these policies, to make sure that they will not be actually punished and fired for teaching the truth to students about racism in Georgia and in our structural racism across the state and our country, because we need to make sure that kids do know about these truths to be able to fight against them and fight against racism. So that's one thing I definitely would want to work on. I think I'd have a different angle probably from Dr. Barge would have when it comes to those policies. And that's okay. That's what this election is about, right? So I also would want to make sure that I do a lot of work on giving guidance to school systems about special education policy and how to educate kids with disabilities and how to make sure we don't miss them. I do think that we have been not meeting our child find mandate, which means we are required to find kids who have disabilities, evaluate them and serve them. And I don't think the state of Georgia is doing a great job at that all the time. We need to make sure that we strengthen that system for young children. I think that's also going to help us increase our literacy rates when we find children who have needs that need to be met early, because the earlier you meet kids' needs, the better they do in the long run, the better they do educationally, the better they do in school, no matter what their needs are. The earlier you meet them, the better they're going to do overall. So it's very important that we find those kids and get them services across the board, across the state of Georgia. And that means kids who are not in school yet, not in daycare, wherever they are, we have to find them and get them services. I want to make sure we work on that and give schools policies about how that works and how that kids in Georgia need to be provided that free and appropriate public education, because that also does not always happen in Georgia. And there is already a process, I'm sure Mr. Barch knows this, about how to deal with a school that's not giving a student that free and appropriate public education in Georgia. You file a due process case, you file a state complaint. There are ways to deal with that already that do go through the Department of Education, partially anyway. And so I definitely think those processes should be made more clear and easier for parents and families to deal with. That we have a great organization called Parent to Parent that helps families with these kinds of needs, and they are not attorneys, but they are people who can help people with these processes and to get the services they need in schools. And they are an official organization that works with these families across the state of Georgia, and school systems know about them as well and refer people to them. And so do I, of course, and other people. So not everyone needs an attorney, not everyone needs to file a due process case, but these folks can help and train parents in how to deal with schools and how to fight for their students who have disabilities. So I want to make sure we strengthen all of that for all students, to make sure our schools are not ableist, and make sure we give direction to schools, that we make sure we put kids in the least restrictive environment, which I don't think is always happening either. So this is something I want to really focus on. I think a lot of families struggle with our public schools, and a lot of families I've spoken to have said that they put their kids in a different school. They homeschool, they do charter, they do a private school. But I think public schools should try to really strengthen how they give services to these kids with disabilities. And I want to make sure that we give good guidance to schools on making sure we follow the federal law. And I also would want to look at school discipline policies, because I think right now across the state of Georgia, it's not consistent, especially when I hear Mr. Morrow saying kids get away with everything. But I know in my experience, kids get expelled for being attacked at school. And that's not okay, because how it works is the school systems, those school systems that punish kids that way, get to get a kid out of school. They basically win either way, like whether the kid did or did not do whatever the thing is, because they get to get the kid out of school for a whole semester or even a whole year before the appeal process is even done. So I want to make sure that schools start looking at these cases and actually having an independent person in charge of making these decisions, So I want to do more training for those hearing officers to actually look at cases and look at whether the kid should be in school or not be in school, whether the kid actually committed whatever the violation of a school rule is or not, and work to make sure that kids get to stay in school with appropriate services, of course, because it sounds like is a lot of kids are acting out right now and they need services. They might need therapy, they might need trauma counseling, all kinds of things that kids need right now. I have a lot of other ideas, of course, but those are some of the things I would focus on first. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, I'm sorry, we have one more. No, I think everybody answered this question. So we have, across the country, we are seeing where police departments are receiving retention bonuses and different bonuses to keep their police on the workforce. What can we do, or what can be done to ensure that those type of bonuses are being spread across the education departments correctly, specifically with our mental health and special needs children? And we will
Do you mind repeating your question one more time? I want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, so across the country, we are seeing how the police departments, they are receiving retention bonuses and other bonuses to keep police on the police force. What can be done to ensure that the same type of funding is given to the school system to mainly to keep the teachers or to recruit teachers or even to strengthen our mental health departments across the school system? Would you like to take that question?
Sure.
All right.
Actually, our districts do have funds to do that. And you probably have seen on television that DeKalb County is having some challenges because they provided those types of bonuses, and perhaps school board members and others in the community might have made different decisions with those dollars. It turns out that many of our districts received hundreds of millions of dollars actually between CARES funds and ESSER funds. These are federal funds that they had a lot of flexibility. The only requirement was to spend 20% of that on learning loss, which is also very critical when we talk about what's happened with COVID. And so what we have seen is districts use some of those funds to pay for retention bonuses and to fill other gaps like mental health services. As an example, Bibb County has done that, use some of their funds to partner with mental health agencies in their community to come into schools and provide services for students. I think those are the kinds of things that we want to see districts do. I am a fan also of doing retention bonuses. I don't know if I would have done that in DeKalb. I would prioritize the needs of students first. And some of the other things in the district. I'm not in that district, so I can't speak to how they made that decision, but I could tell you that I do believe that retention bonuses ought to be a part of addressing, making sure that teachers and professionals are staying in their classrooms and in their schools. I mentioned before when I was superintendent, our teacher retention rate was 25%, and we got it up to 75%. And part of it was listening and getting the resources that teachers needed. But we also used our funds to do things like give $750 small grants, if you will, to every teacher that they could use for their own professional development. Oftentimes, teachers feel frustrated and irritated that they receive the same PD every year. It may not be specific to their particular need. And so we changed that in our schools by giving the $750 professional development budget. And so there are a lot of creative and innovative things that we can do. And especially in this environment where teachers are feeling frustrated and left out and unheard, that we need to create those kinds of opportunities where we get them to stay. But we also know finally that it's not the money that's going to get teachers to stay. What gets them to stay, yes, we want to pay them higher salaries, but it's having principals who care, who respect them, who give them the resources they need to be successful. It's being in a school where parents are partners in education and help to make their jobs easier. And so we have a job to do in the state of Georgia to change how we see education and educators. Because if we want teachers to stay, we want them to deliver a high quality education to our students, we have to create the environment in which they want to stay in.
Thank you so much. Ms. Hitchens, would you like to take that question?
Sure. I want to make sure I understood. Was it about mental health services?
It was about getting more money into
Okay.
the mental health services, yes.
I thought so. I wasn't sure. I was like, wait a minute. So yes, I of course do think we definitely need more money for mental health services in Georgia, and I actually want us to have trauma-informed schools across the state, especially because so many of the children in our state have been through a trauma, like way more than normal. I mean, of course, we always have had a lot of children who've had trauma. We need to make sure we serve those kids the best that we can. But right now, after a pandemic, almost all children have been through a trauma. Children have lost people, children have been isolated, children have lived in homes that maybe don't give them everything they need, or maybe like Mr. Morrow said, they were babysitting while they're doing virtual school because their parents had to work. Like all kinds of things were happening to these kids, and it definitely affected them. And now they need to get services before they'll be able to learn. So I think it's very important that we work to give kids the mental health services that they need in schools, and get all the funding that we can for it. I do agree we do have some funding from the American Rescue Plan and the CARES Act. And of course, they have ESSER grant. We have lots of funding for schools. We need to make sure we can get funding that stays and that we can continue to have, that we hire people in schools to stay there. Like, for example, if it's trauma-informed schools, we have therapists in schools doing groups in the schools, because the more we can get kids in the mental place where they are able to learn, the more we're going to be able to help them catch up. And as Dr. Parch is saying, we need to make sure they can all read by the time they're in third grade on their grade level. And it's very important to make sure that literacy is key for all kids, and that we get them there. And if we don't, we're going to have a much harder struggle. And we know this. I think Mr. Morrow is probably experiencing it at his school. I bet a lot of the kids that are struggling are ones that were failed earlier in their education careers. We need to make sure we get them mental health services so they can be prepared to learn and gain those literacy skills, and of course, math skills as well. So I agree with you. And I think the teachers might also need those services and to make our schools be community schools in which we can receive mental health services and physical health services, all services in the school building, to make it easier for families and make it be smaller schools that families can walk to. And I think that's going to be an important way to make mental health a priority. And we definitely can do that in the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Morrow, you're next.
Yes, sir. Thank you. About a week and a half ago, every teacher in Georgia received a $2,000 bonus from Governor Kemp, but it was taxed. So they took like $600 from it. So first, if you're going to give us a bonus, it should be tax-free. Second, in order to have more teachers, maybe we can incorporate like a teacher next door program similar to what they have for police officers, because housing is very expensive. And most of the first year teachers I know, their salary is like $2,400 a month, but their rent is like $1,800. So they end up having to have a roommate, or maybe possibly continue to be in a relationship with someone they don't want to be with because they got to help them pay their bills. So teachers don't feel supported. A lot of times administrators, they be like, I got you, instead of saying, okay, you didn't have this, you didn't have your standards on the board, you didn't have your elements on the board, so we're gonna work on this. That really irritates a lot of teachers and causes them to leave this profession because they feel like they're not being supported by the administration. Next, master's degree. A lot of teachers would like to have their master's degree to make $7,000 or $8,000 more yearly, but when it costs $30,000 or $40,000, it really doesn't make any sense to pay $30,000 or $40,000 when you're only going to make $7,000 or $8,000 extra a year. So maybe the school districts can have like a reimbursement program, but maybe they don't pay the whole thing, or maybe they pay half. But these are the things that teachers want. And I'm speaking on behalf of teachers because I've been one since 1997. Now, as far as mental health, I would like to see every school district have their own mental health facility within the school district. That way children can receive the help that they need. Also teachers, because teachers are dealing with a lot of mental health issues. Their blood pressure is high. They're just sick and tired of being disrespected. And we're the only profession where you can get cursed out every day on a daily basis and is expected to run down your back, and you're supposed to come back with a smile on your face every day. So that right there, the respect that teachers are not receiving, the lack of pay that they're not receiving, the mental disrespect, emotional disrespect that they're receiving, these are the things that we got to fix. So until we do that, we can talk and tell you that we're going to do this, this, and this. But until we have high quality teachers that are happy, that leave work happy, come to work happy, because a lot of my coworkers, they come to work upset and they leave work angry, and they take their anger with them home, and they take it out on their family members and things of that nature. So I'm a teacher. I'm on the front line. I'm in the trenches. I really, really understand what teachers are going through. So that's my answer.
Mr. Bard, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great question. I think my time as a superintendent in rural Georgia gives me a pretty good understanding of some of the issues that school districts in this state face, and that is our state funding formula. While pay is very important to teachers, as many of the folks have said this evening, it is not necessarily the predominant motivating factor. The school environment in which they work is critical. The leadership that they work under is critical. But the federal funds that come down occasionally in the midst of things, let's say like the pandemic, where money was made available in school districts, many districts use that to pay some retention bonuses or signing bonuses, or typically they are one-time bonuses. After a year, it's not going to be there. So where do you go moving forward? And in that case, that's where you go back and look at the funding formula and how school districts are funded in Georgia. Having been that local school superintendent in a rural district in Georgia, I know that there are some serious issues in QBE when it comes to equalization. Equalization gives money to the lower income school districts in the state of Georgia. And the state sets those based on your tax digest, and they rank counties based on tax wealth. Well, the problem with that, for example, in the district that I was in, we were a very rural school district. 100% of our students ate free and reduced lunch. And yet the state considered us one of the most wealthy counties in the state. And so what happened is when they killed school district's 5 mil share, how much money that the district is responsible for chipping in, they take that money into a kind of a kitty, and they redistribute that to other school districts that maybe are not in that top tier of school districts in the state based on the land wealth and the tax digest. The problem where I was is the state and federal government owned over a third of the land in our county. And so there was no possible way for the school district to generate any tax revenue from that land. There was no way to develop it. And so so the formula doesn't take that into consideration. So our 5 mils went to other school districts. So you've got Gwinnett County that is earning millions and millions of dollars in equalization, and you have a school district in rural South Georgia that is earning zero, and they have 100% of their students eating free and reduced lunch. And so the county just north of me, I say all that because the county just north of me was giving teachers $5,000 signing bonuses because they got a lot of federal money through their military base and federal impact aid. So there is an understanding, I think, that you need in this position to be able to fight for all districts in the state of Georgia to make sure they have the funds that they need to address these things like signing bonuses, retention bonuses, making sure teachers are paid a just and fair wage that would encourage them to come work for you. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see a question in the audience from Melissa. Melissa, you have the floor. Melissa, are you here? Can you hear me?
I am.
All right.
I'm doing like 15 things at once. Hold on one second. My question is for, well, I have two questions that they kind of are not related, but the first question is, as a teacher, I'm a teacher myself, and I'm not really sure of who's responsible for what policy and whatnot. So as far as teacher salaries, is that the responsibility of the state superintendent, or is that left to individual counties superintendents? And the other question is, how well do you work with those that you may disagree with? Two different questions, I know, but.
All right. Thank you so much for your question. Ms. Cersei, you can have that question first.
Sure. Would you like me to answer both?
Yes, please.
Okay. So first question is about how teachers are paid. You're actually right on both accounts. The state has a base salary, and then local school districts supplement that. And so that's why you see that, Atlanta may have one salary, Cobb may have another one, Butts County may have another one, because districts are supplementing what the state base is. And so one of the things that I would like to do as state school superintendent is significantly increase the state portion of the base teacher salary. The second question is one that I really like, because I am the only person running for state school superintendent who has been a state legislator, both on the Democrat or the Republican side. And as a Democrat, I have passed laws in a Republican-controlled legislature. That's not something that is extremely common, because it's difficult to do. We all know how challenging politics can be, how divisive it can be. But I believe when you're able to establish strong relationships, when you find shared values and people respect who you are, you're able to get things done. And so while there are many things that I disagreed with some of my colleagues on issues like Medicaid or voting rights, when it came to education, I was able to get a lot done, working across the aisle, working with people that I didn't agree with on other issues, but we came together on behalf of children. And I'll just say it's absolutely critical for this job as state school superintendent. If you do not have that kind of experience, you will be a fish out of water. I will tell you that how the legislature feels about the state school superintendent is a direct reflection of things like why we have the governor's office of student achievement. That's basically a second department of education, because the state superintendent at the time did not have the respect of the legislature or the governor. And so it is absolutely critical for the state school superintendent to be able to garner relationships on both sides of the aisle, to have a track record of getting things done, and to be able to start this job on day one without having to figure out how to navigate the politics, where the bathrooms are at the state capitol, how to get to the Speaker of the House, how to have conversations with the chair of the education committee. I served on education for 12 years. So these are the critical things that you need in order to be successful in this role. And I am happy and grateful and honored that I do have a track record of working across the aisle, or working even people within my party that I may have disagreed with, but can still get things done on behalf of children.
Thank you so much. Mr. Morrow.
Yes, sir.
You have the floor on that.
Thank you. So just recently, I teach in Clayton County Schools. So just recently, Clayton County School Board, they proposed a $9,000 raise for all Clayton County teachers. We were very happy to hear that. And right now we're waiting for them to vote on it. So, but like Ms. Cersei stated, a lot of schools, like when I was teaching in APS, and when my principal gave me those 11 needs improvement to try to force me to stay there and put me on a professional development plan, I resigned and took like a $10,000 pay cut, because I felt like my happiness was more important than money at that time. And I hated to make that sacrifice, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Now, as far as being able to work with people I disagree with, I've been a teacher since 1997. I've had disagreement with parents, I've had disagreements with students, administrators, but I understand that my main purpose is to have a genuine concern for my students and to see all of them become successful. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hitchens, you have the floor.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to sneak in a call to my 5-year-old to tell him good night. But will you repeat the question for me? Make sure I missed it.
Melissa, are you available to repeat the question?
Oh, it's Melissa's question. Okay, I remember Melissa's question, I think. So hopefully I'll go back to it and remember most of it. I might answer part of it first, because I do remember the one question was about whether we can work with people who are different from us. I definitely can do that. That's one thing that attorneys do every day in mediations and in court, of course. And we do it with respect, and being able to actually, reach agreements takes a lot of mutual respect and work, of course. And I definitely can do that. I've mediated a lot of agreements in my time, work with people on the other side all the time, but I also would know that I would not want to be, of course I want to work with them, but I would not give up on a lot of values that I think are important. For example, I wouldn't let things like vouchers or tax breaks for kids to go to private schools get through on my watch anyway. I wouldn't agree with those and be part of those bills. I would make sure to do everything I could to try to save public education. And now, what was the first question, Richard? That's the one I don't remember. I remember the second one.
Melissa, are you available to?
Oh, you
Yes.
don't have-
Well, the first question was about teachers, as I'm a teacher, and I wasn't quite sure who was responsible for setting the salary for teachers, whether it be the state superintendent or the superintendents of the individual counties.
That's right. Thank you, Melissa. Yes, and I think we've got a little bit of an answer for that. And it is true that for the most part, there's a base salary that's statewide, and then states or superintendents can add to that salary in different local school systems. But also there are some teachers that are state employees and some teachers that are just employees of the school system. So the pay raise that actually went out, there was a statewide pay raise. There are some teachers who don't get state pay. And so there are some teachers who won't get some of those raises in the same way that others will. So that is just a fact as well. I've been hearing about that from some teachers. So it kind of depends on the school system, but it's a mix of both. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Barr.
Ready for me?
Yes. I was looking
Okay.
for you in the chat.
All right, very good. I think Ms. Searcy would remember this, but several years ago, the legislature actually passed a law that required for school districts to make a choice of whether they were either going to be a charter school district or a status quo school district. And I forget the name of the other school district off the top of my head. Strategic waiver school district.
Waiver, yeah.
But each one of those districts, aside from the status quo, gave school districts the ability to waive the state teacher salary schedule, which almost every single district in this state has waived that salary schedule. Prior to that requirement from the legislature, the state set the teacher salary schedule. It was not a function of the state superintendent at all. It was a function of the legislature. But now with the state requiring the school districts either adopt charter or strategic waiver status or be status quo, I think all but 2 districts in the state have adopted either charter or strategic waiver. So those 2 school districts that are status quo still must abide by the state salary schedule. The state legislature still sets that schedule, and school districts can choose to use that schedule, or they can use their own. So it is left up to the local school district whether to use the state salary schedule or to use their own. And there are local supplements that most school districts offer. Of course, in rural Georgia, those supplements are much lower than they are in metro because of their tax base. They don't have the local revenue to offer the large supplements that a metro Atlanta district offers. That kind of answers your question about the salary. It is a function of the legislature. They set the salary schedule, but then again, most school districts have waived that schedule and they can develop their own or they can use the state's. So it's kind of a hodgepodge, depends on which district you're actually working in, how they use that schedule. And as far as working across the aisle and working with other folks, I've been state superintendent before. I've done that before. I actually had more issues with my own party. Ms. Searcy probably can attest to that. I had quite a number of friends across the aisle because education is a nonpartisan issue. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. Kids don't come to us as Republican or Democrat. They come to us as children who need an education, who need a level playing field from which they can launch their lives successfully. So it does not bother me to work across the aisle. I certainly can do that and have done that, and not an issue whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to turn it over to Ron Booth. You have the floor.
Thank you, Rashard. Candidates, with respect to funding, how would you address the ripple effects of budget cuts?
Ms. Hitchens, would you like to take the question first?
Sure, I would definitely fight hard to not have budget cuts because we need to make sure we make education a priority in the state of Georgia. And the only way to make it great is to make sure we invest in it and we invest in it with equity. As Mr. Barger was saying, we need to make sure that all school systems have enough money to actually educate the children. And I would say more than enough money, because it's not cheap necessarily to provide a good education to a student, or a great one especially. So I think we'd have to try to avoid budget cuts and do whatever we could to not have them. But I also think we can look at what some charter schools have done to make sure we can get more funding, that if we don't get it from the legislature, which hopefully we should, but if we don't, some charter schools have set up boards, and well, most of them have, of course, and in those boards, they have a lot of fundraising arms, and a lot of these charter schools have huge resources. And we need to make sure that we can do that exact kind of thing for public schools in Georgia, so that public schools in Georgia can also raise money like that and be able to have those resources in case they don't get the funding they need to get from the state of Georgia. But I think, especially if you put all Democrats in place across the state of Georgia, we're going to be able to focus on education and increase the funding for education, and definitely not have any funding cuts.
Thank you. Mr. Barge, would you like to address that question?
Sure. All right, I'm unmuted. Actually, I was faced with that all 4 years of my previous term in office as state superintendent, where the governor's budget withheld over $1 billion in funding from school districts across the state of Georgia every single year. And it was quite a challenge for all school districts in the state of Georgia on how they handled that. Those were the austerity cuts that I'm sure Ms. Searcy remembers those. There was a time during that 4 years that I had about 6 school districts in the state that were literally weeks away from bankruptcy. When you withhold $1 million in funding from school districts that they've actually state formula, they only have a $15 million budget. That is a huge expense that is very difficult for them to absorb. And in those years, we had thousands of teachers that lost their jobs across the state. In many cases, we were able to survive in that school district simply did not replace teachers who were retiring. They let the retiring teachers retire. They didn't fill those positions. And I mean, it wasn't the best case scenario, but it was what needed to be done for a lot of school districts because they had no local tax base to make up the withholding. Folks in Atlanta maybe not have experienced that because they have a large enough local tax base to make up the cuts from the state, but in most of Georgia, they did not. So there are some things that you can do as state superintendent that I always look at doing, and that is to be able to enter into statewide contracts for resources that districts may use, that they may need. Oftentimes you can enter into a statewide contract for something that is very helpful, that you can see significant reductions in the amount of money it costs to enter into that contract as a state rather than individual school systems. And then you're able to provide that to school districts across the state without them having to use their own money, local money for those things. So absolutely been there and done that. And during that time, Georgia, again, as I said in my opening remarks, had their highest scores in state history in fourth grade reading and math on the National Assessment of Educational Progress. We ranked 7th in the nation overall in Education Week's quality of education. We were the 7th highest ranking state in the country in quality of education in the midst of all those budget cuts. So again, there is, you certainly make your agency one that is customer service oriented, that can actually provide guidance and direction and focus and vision for local school districts. And you do everything you can to cut costs to make sure that the local school districts aren't absorbing those if you can avoid it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Thirsty, would you like to take that question?
Dr. Bard, you took me back to a real tough time.
It was very tough.
Woo, that was tough. I was in the legislature at the time, and we really had to make some really, really tough decisions. And frankly, all departments got cut. But I'm glad that we made it through that. And I will tell everybody that we're in much better times. I don't foresee any budget cuts coming. Budgets haven't been cut, frankly, in 3 years, actually. QBE, although it needs to be restructured, and I want to talk about that in a second, it has actually been fully funded for the last 3 years. And that's important, particularly because district, yes, Curry, it is true. It has been fully funded for the last 3 years. And so that is also in addition to the fact that all districts got that funding even while they were not in session. And so that on top of the dollars from CARES and ESSER put our school districts in a very good position financially. And that makes me feel good. But one thing that I do want to point out is money is not the answer to how we drive student achievement. We absolutely don't want to see any districts starving. We don't want to see any districts nearing bankruptcy. But Dr. Bard said something very important. During the time of the hardest budget cuts, we're also the time of the highest student achievement. So that's a very interesting statement. And we need to think about the correlation or the lack thereof between higher funding and higher student achievement. The question is really, how do we prioritize those funds? And as someone who has been a state school superintendent, who contrary to what Curry was saying, I ran a set of charter schools that did not have all of these robust fundraising sources. I'd like to meet some of those charter schools that have that in Georgia. We didn't have that. What we did have to do was do a whole lot with a little. But we figured out a way to do that when we focused our resources on what was best for students. But we also at the same time made sure that all of our janitors made a livable wage and that our paraprofessionals were the highest paid in the state. And so what I've learned about being an education leader and running schools and being a policymaker is that, and I think all of us know this, even when you're in the tightest of times, you learn how to make tough decisions and focus on the right things. And so I never want to see our schools go back to a time where they are challenged financially. I do want to see us change our funding formula. I would like to see it more student-based than district-based. Dr. Barge mentioned this whole equalization grant piece. I live in Cobb County. Cobb County pays a lot in equalization grants. But we have a lot of students who are on free and reduced lunch or eligible for that, and we could use some of those resources. And so there needs to be a further conversation in this state, and I think it needs to be led by the state school superintendent about how we actually fund students and not school districts, how we ensure that our students who are living in poverty have the resources that they need. And maybe that number is $6,000 in one district, it may be 10 in another. But we've got to have those conversations about how do we get the students most in need, the resources that are required for them to be successful.
Thank you so much. Now, I think I lost track of someone. Did everyone get a chance to answer this question?
James needs to talk about teachers. Come on, let's hear it. What you got?
All right.
All right,
Thank you
now,
so
so-
much.
all right. First, the main objective is to save money. So first, I feel like school districts need to look at how facilities are managed. Also, I feel like maybe possibly if there was a shortage, but as the other candidates stated, the money is there, but a lot of school districts, they're holding on to it or using it for something else. Possibly monitor what the school districts are actually spending the funds on, maybe submit like a report every 3 months to let everybody know, like the stakeholders and the school board members, what they're spending the money on. Also, I feel like school districts need to have teachers on the school board because, a lot of people create policy and they never been in education. Some people in rural areas possibly never finished high school, but they were elected as school board members. So I feel like teachers should be on the school board. But as far as the money, raising taxes, if there was a shortage, but there's not a shortage, as the other candidates stated, but maybe raise the state taxes by 1 or 2 cents, just to have like a surplus of funds to make sure the students receive everything that they need, especially in the rural areas, because the students in the rural areas are the ones that suffer the most. Imagine if I was a teacher in a small town and my kid wanted to play baseball, but yet in small towns, they might have basketball, football, and track. That's it. So most people feel that their child will have a better opportunity in a larger city and a larger school district. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, I wanted to thank everyone for coming out and speaking to the community about your platforms. And at this time, I would like to turn it back to the candidate for 2 minutes for closing remarks as we begin to wrap up. So we'll start with you, Ms. Hitchens.
Thank you. Okay, guys, it was really nice to be here with you, South Fulton folks, today. Again, I'm Curry Hitchens. I don't know if I really did an intro. I'm not sure now, but I don't remember now. I've done so many of these, but I would like to wrap it up by saying that I will definitely work with the Democratic Party in Georgia and make sure to pull through as many candidates as I can, down ballot, up ballot, all around, because I think it's going to take really to make a good change for Georgia schools, a lot more Democrats in office, because Democrats will focus on improving education, making sure it's truthful, making sure we change laws that make it so that we can't teach the truth to students, make sure we change laws so that we can protect students who are LGBTQ, including right now transgender students who are being bullied by the legislature into not being able to play sports. That's not okay. We need to make sure that we give our students a good education across the state of Georgia, a great education, but also one that includes social emotional learning so that we can care about others in our state, others who are like us and others who are not like us. We need to make sure that we are not making banning books easier and making more paperwork for teachers. Some more laws we need to repeal. We need to make sure that kids can read whatever books they want to read, put them in their hands. We are not having a problem of kids reading too many books. That's not a problem in Georgia. We want to make sure that children want to read. Make sure that children are reading about topics that are interesting to them, topics that are letting them learn about different kind of kids. I see someone's asking, maybe they're asking if I'm a PhD. I am an attorney, so I have a JD, but I also have a master's in education, and my master's is actually in children's literature. So I'm very passionate about making sure that kids can learn through literature and that we give kids a good start to their literacy early. We catch them early, we get them reading, we get them not only reading, but loving reading, because I think the only way for a kid to get really good at reading is for them to love it so much that they do it all the time. Let them read a lot, let them learn about the world through reading. We need to make sure that we change a lot of laws, and to do that, we need to elect Democrats. And I'm Curry Hitchens, I'm the person to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barge, you have the floor. 2 minutes for closing remarks.
You're muted.
There we go. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity to be with you tonight and to discuss the issues around education. I'm running to ensure that our children receive a quality education in our state. And I want to make sure that that is an education and not an indoctrination. We have to stop placing the schools as a wedge between parents and their children. We have to empower parents. We have to make sure that they are a partner with us in the education of their children. We have to make sure that we're providing transparency that the parents won't. And again, help them to partner with us in educating their children. I have a vast, broad, and deep educational experience in the state of Georgia as a teacher, as an administrator, as a curriculum director, as a local school superintendent, as the state school superintendent. I've been the state director of career technical and agriculture education. I created Georgia's career pathway system that is so successful right now in raising graduation rates in the state of Georgia. But my experience is also has been very successful. I was recognized as a star teacher when I was a classroom teacher. I was assistant principal of the year for the state of Georgia. Experience matters. Leadership matters. And looking back again as the state school superintendent previously, I think we had some of our most successful times as a state with education during that time period. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. We have a lot of room to grow. We have really been going backwards for the last several years. The incumbent has been in office 8 years. We have our lowest test scores in fourth grade reading and math that we've had in 15 years. And that was measured pre-pandemic. It's going to be much worse once we administer the National Assessment of Educational Progress again post-pandemic. So we've got to make sure that we have leadership in place that has a proven record of raising student achievement and knows how to get the job done, because guys, we're in trouble. Before the pandemic, we were the lowest we've been in years. So we've got a lot of ground to make up, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I would appreciate your vote and your support. For more information, you can go to johnbarge.com. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Mr. Morrow, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm not a former state superintendent. I'm not a former superintendent. I'm not an attorney or a pediatric dentist. I'm a teacher. This is the only profession I know. So when I speak, I'm speaking for teachers. The only way that we're going to have quality education for the kids is if we have quality teachers in place. And again, it's about retaining teachers. I used to teach AP United States history. And maybe I could have been accused of teaching critical race theory at a time, because by teaching United States history, there's a lot of topics that you touch on. So say, for example, if I talk about Ronald Reagan in 1988 signed the Civil Liberties Act, giving every Japanese American $20,000. Now that would be okay. But if I was to come back and say that when Japan dropped the bomb on Pearl Harbor and the United States government went around and rounded up every Japanese American, took everything that they owned and placed them in internment camps, I consider that racist. 1882, President Chester Arthur signed the Chinese Exclusion Act. Now I can talk about that. But what they don't want me to talk about is the fact that the law was created to keep Chinese immigrants from being able to move to the United States to work on the Transcontinental Railroad because they were doing better quality work than their white counterparts. That would be considered critical race theory. So I wanted to touch on that. Now, as far as the gender bill, the only issue is I have, and I can talk about the swimmer, it was a guy that was ranked like 460 in the nation as a male swimmer. Then he changed his gender and he ended up being #1 in the nation and winning a gold medal. I do not agree with that for the simple fact that men have testosterone, their arms, they're stronger, and I don't feel like they should be able to compete with women. Maybe we can create like their own sport or something like that, but I really have a problem with that because it's not fair to the females that worked hard all their life to try to achieve their goals and dreams to win a gold medal or things of that nature. My name is James Morrow. I've been a teacher for 25 years. I'm the only candidate, Republican or Democrat, that can say that he's currently in the classroom right now and really understand what's going on. In order to fix the problem, you have to know what the problem is. And many of the candidates don't know the problem. So my name is James Morrow. Please vote for me, and I'll be the one that gets the job done. Vote Morrow for a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we will close it out with you, Ms. Thurston. You have the floor.
Thank you again, Rashard and South Fulton Democrats, for having us this evening. When I decided to get into this race in early March, it was heavy on my heart. And I decided to get in not because I wanted another political position. In fact, I'd been out of office for 8 years and was enjoying my life. But as my husband and I, he's a retired state trooper of 26 years, as we look at what education looks like for our 3 school-age children, it becomes deeply personal. When I think about our students in rural districts, when I think about students in urban districts who are not getting the things that they need, students who are falling through the cracks because they're not getting the attention, the resources that are absolutely necessary for their success. When I think about teachers and what they are facing every single day, and I think Mr. Morrow does a really good job of helping us to understand the plight of teachers. They need a voice, they need a champion, as do parents who are navigating schools every single day like me and my husband. We have to have a state school superintendent who is experienced. Again, I'm the only candidate in this race, Democrat or Republican, who has actually served as a state legislator. That experience is absolutely critical when it comes to getting things done. On the Democratic side, I'm the only candidate who has actually run schools. This job is a policy job, it's a leadership job. And so having the experience of hiring principals, of changing how we hire teachers, of engaging parents and making them real partners, giving them the tools that they need to access this public education system that belongs to them and their families. Working as a legislator to get things done on behalf of kids, that's my track record. I'm proud of the endorsements that I have, whether it's Georgia Equality, a number of pastors across the state. In Atlanta, that includes Reverend Tim McDonald, Craig Oliver, DeKalb County preachers such as Jamal Bryan and Cynthia Hale and Lee May. And I say these names because these are people that we recognize who have been on the front lines fighting for justice and fairness for decades. And they trust me to be their next state school superintendent because they understand how high the stakes are. When I think about the fact that people are talking about returning to what things were like prior to COVID, that's the worst thing we could do for our schools. All you had to do was walk in a school pre-COVID and you could see the challenges that our babies are facing. And so returning to pre-COVID times is the worst thing that we can do for a school system that needs to be focused on serving the students who are digital natives. We're still telling our students who live on cell phones that they can't bring their cell phones to school. We're still trying to deliver a Telegram education to a TikTok generation. And when I think about the need for a state school superintendent who understands where we are as a state, how high the stakes are, who has the experience as a state legislator, as a former superintendent, as a mom who is navigating schools every single day for 3 children, I understand how serious this is. I understand that we don't have time for on-the-job training. We don't have time for backwards thinking and focus on cultural wars when there are children who are suffering, when there are teachers who need a champion, when there are parents who need someone to stand up for them. And so I'm proud to offer myself to be your next state school superintendent because I want to lead us into the future. I want together for us to reimagine what public education can and should look like in the state of Georgia. My vision is for us to lead the nation in reimagining public education, to create schools and school systems that are relevant, that touch on what students need in 2022 and beyond, not for us to go backwards. And so as you go to the polls, if you vote early tomorrow is the last day, go and vote for the future of education in our state. Go and vote for experience, go and vote for a champion for teachers, for parents, for our students. Vote for someone who has experience and who was ready to hit the job, hit the ground running, and do the job on day one. I am Alicia Thomas Searcy. You can reach me at searcyforsuperintendent.com. Email me if you have more questions at info@searcyforsuperintendent.com. Let's make history in Georgia. Let's do this together. Let's change our education system for my 3 kids and the 1.8 million children who attend our schools today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of the South Fulton Coalition, I would like to thank all of the candidates for coming out tonight. We are going to make this video available on our website, and I will also email it out to all the candidates. It'll probably be tomorrow morning, and I can email it out to you. And once again, I want to thank you all for coming out, and I look forward to speaking to you guys in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
All right, thank you.